Good evening. How are you? This is Tuesday night podcast, and we're on the Beat Radio Bali. And we've got a special guest tonight, all the way from New York, via Brazil somehow, and been living in Bali for the last year, not to be mistaken for those two young girls that talk too much on Twitter.
Oh, please, no. I don't even do Twitter. Twitter scares me.
I know, those girls should have learned a lesson there, I'm sure.
My goodness.
Anyway, this is Lila.
Lila.
Mm-hmm. Is that short for something? Lila?
It's not.
No?
Mm-mm.
Lila who?
Lila Donalo.
Lila Donalo from New York City. And Lila is, amongst many things, I'm sure, she's quite famous for a podcast. A podcast about sexology and all that concerns.
Well, not sexology. I can't lay claim to sexology. That would require some PhDs I don't have. But
right.
But sex, love, and relationships of all kinds.
Yeah.
Intimacy of all kinds.
And so anyway, we'd start off with three, small questions. Where were you born? Which we've already spoken about. How old are you? And how did you get involved in the topic we are going to talk about for the next hour?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York, to an Italian-American father, hence the Brooklyn, and a Brazilian mother, imported from Brazil to marry my father.
Right.
And I'm 38 years old.
And you've been in Bali for 1 year. How did that come about?
I came for a 2-month vacation at the end of January 2020.
Vacation.
Yes, a 2-month vacation to get myself rejuvenated. I was in a pretty intense seasonal affective disorder winter funk in that winter of 2019. And when I'm in that sort of state, I sit down with myself and I go, okay, is there anything you want to do? Mm-hmm. Anything at all? And I said to myself, yeah, I want to go to Bali. I'm like, that's what you want to do? That's the only thing you want to do? Said, yeah, I want to go to Bali.
And how did that come about? Like, why Bali?
So if I'm very honest, 10, 15 years ago, I read Eat, Pray, Love. Mm-hmm. And
I thought you were going to say that.
Yeah, well, I would love to deny it, but I'm not in the business of lying, so I just tell you the truth.
No, there's nothing wrong with that, man. There's been thousands of people coming to Bali for that particular reason.
I know, and she's brilliant. She's still one of my favorite writers and creators of any medium, really. So I read that. It went on the top of my list, and a few years back, I actually signed up for a credit card with one of those big mileage bonuses because I thought, okay, this is my Bali flight. Right. This is my round trip to Bali. And I will know when it is time to use it. And so in December, when I'm just flat out with depression, I was like, now's the time. I want to go to Bali, and I can take a couple months. I was teaching yoga at the time. That was my 14-year career. And I'll still have my gig when I get back.
Right.
So I'll just go for 2 months, and I'll rejuvenate, and I'll breathe some fresh air, and I'll enjoy myself and cultivate a lot of pleasure, and then I'll come back, and I'll do this immersive theater show I was working on called Boto. And I'll go back to teaching my yoga classes, and I'll pick up my podcast again and start releasing again. But
wait a minute. Where did you go to? You arrived in Bali, and you had friends here, or did you just kind of lob into town?
So not really. I knew a few people over the past few years who said, go to Bali. They had come. They had spent more time than they planned, and they suggested that I come. One of them was my former housemate, Valentine. Valentine said...
Hi, Valentine.
Valentine, I love you. Valentine said presciently, because he knew I was going to come to Ubud first, he said, Lila, there's going to be a lot of people in Ubud you don't like. And I was like, I know, but...
like who? Like Like people that had read Eat, Pray, Love kind of people? Or,
not all of those.
No.
No, more like the people who
tourists
pretend to be so spiritual that they lose track of kindness and groundedness, real life, connection to other humans, that they become so self-centered. And what I think of it as look at, like the chakras and my are aligned and all of this,
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them in Bali, generally, not just Ubud.
Yeah.
Also Canggu, right? But anyway, I remember
higher concentration in Ubud.
I guess, yeah, and rightfully so, because it's quite a spiritual place, right?
Center, yeah.
And I do recall going up there a few years ago and in cafes, and there was all these, well, not particularly young women, but the kind of middle-aged women sitting on their own in cafes,
looking for someone,
waiting for
the
what's
Brazilian
his name,
man.
Antonio Banderas. That's well, it's good for business.
Yeah,
and I hope they found something while they were here.
I hope so. It's usually not what you're looking for, but I hope they got what they needed rather than potentially what they wanted.
Well, I guess that leads us to the next question. Did you find what you needed in that? Well, in the initial month, say, for example, how was it?
Oh, in the initial month. It's so hard to even remember, but yes, I did. I walked around very slowly for the first 2 weeks. I wore my enormous sun hat. I had this vacation wardrobe, which is not typically how I dress. Right, it's like flowery and flowy, and I want to burn it all. Right. I want to burn it all now. I'm so sick of it. That's why you see me wearing a more urban style now, because it's what I was missing, what I was craving, and self-expression through my clothing is really important to me. So,
and there is quite an urban scene here too.
Yes, but mostly in Canggu that I noticed. That first month, I followed the arrows that led to pleasure, and I did anything that was pleasurable and nothing that wasn't. So I would just ask my inner little girl, my inner hedonist, my inner pleasure seeker. Okay, what do you want to do now? You want a gelato? Okay, we go get a gelato. You want to go see the monkeys? All right, let's go see the monkeys.
Yeah.
Did that once.
Did anything hedonistic happen at that point?
No. Nothing. Actually, my life here was pretty barren for the first 6 months.
Can be like that.
And that was unusual for me because I've traveled solo across Europe, across the United States twice, in South America. I've gone everywhere by myself, and I made friends everywhere I went, and it wasn't difficult. And I called back to my friends in the States, and I was like, I don't understand. I've never been in a place where it is so difficult to connect with people.
Really?
Yeah.
And that's in Ubud, or you'd already come down this way?
That was in Ubud and Uluwatu, because when I thought we were going to be kicked out because of visa stuff, I said, well, if I'm going to be kicked out, I'm going to spend my last month by the ocean. So I went to Uluwatu.
Make the most of it.
Yeah. And Uluwatu is the most magnificent place that I have ever lived, and I was the fucking loneliest. Oh shit, can I swear on the radio? Oh, I did it twice.
We'll let you get away with it.
I was the loneliest that I have ever
been.
been.
Uluwatu is quite a lonely place too, right? There's not particularly a lot going on.
Well, and apparently what I understood is that if you don't surf, they're just not interested in you.
As well. Well, if you don't surf, there's nothing to do. I guess there's a few restaurants you can go to and hang out until 8 o'clock and everything closes. Yes. I'd imagine.
Yes. That happened.
I used to go surfing, so I know that community pretty well.
Yeah.
It's
pretty insular.
Well, they're great if you're surfing.
They're great if you're surfing, of course.
If not, they're the most boring tribe on the planet. But
that was my experience.
And you can't quote me on that.
Yeah, I was really lonely. And the reason why I do everything that I do and everything that I ever have done is because I was a really lonely kid. And to experience it so viscerally, so having lived in an intentional community for the past 5 years, where I had essentially built-in belonging, right? No matter what, I could always come home to a place where I belonged, to people who were connected to me, who I could have deep conversations with. It's really powerful. When you have it, it is easy to take it for granted. And so these 6 months that I was here and barely found a person I wanted to spend time with, maybe 2 people, 3 people I wanted to spend time with, who weren't available very much to spend time with me, right? So
they were on holiday, or they were living here?
one living here and two in a similar situation to me, where they planned to come and stay for a little while and wound up staying for a long while. They're both still here.
Stuck in Bali.
Not stuck. I never use the word stuck, because I really feel that I must honor how fortunate I am to be here and to have wound up here at this time in the world. So I never ever say stuck.
Nor would I. That's just in parentheses, you know. Stuck. That's the way people talk about it. But that's not really the reality. You're kind of happy. No, you're fortunate to be here, as you pointed out. So why didn't those people have time?
Oh, that's not the question I want to answer.
Okay. What's the question?
I really want to...
What was the question?
I really wanted to say that to have such a recent, visceral experience of a lack of belonging, to have been so lonely, so deeply, so recently, connects me to a lot of people in the whole world right now, and reaffirms everything that I am devoting myself to, all of my work, all of the things that I'm creating to combat loneliness, to create more intimacy in the world, because I felt how my mental health and physical health suffered, how depressed I became because I had no in-person community. And I had a lot of people across the world who love me, but I couldn't touch them and I couldn't see them. And that's true for a lot of people right now. They can't touch them and they can't see them. And so,
but people are also getting closer at that time to, you know, myself. I was contacting people I hadn't talked to for quite some time as well, just to check in, see how they're going. You know, they could have been on the other side of the world, or around the corner, or whatever as well, just as an aside.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing, to be more connected to this web, to have this magic of technology that allows us. Imagine going through this without that. It would be desperately lonely, you know. So,
yeah, but being lonely is not a particularly terrible thing as well, because you can then sit back and figure out who you are and how you're going to deal with it yourself, you know, without depending on anyone else.
I was going to say, it depends on how you deal with it. And for a lot of people, it is a terrible fate.
Yeah, but it wasn't that long ago. There was no internet, no connection per se. Well,
but you would
visceral.
see people in person.
Yeah.
You would be allowed to see
That's
people
right.
in person. You didn't have to wear a mask and be 6 feet from them. So
yeah, but if you're in a foreign place and you're alone, you know, that no matter, you know, whether there's, you know, internet or not, the circumstances are going to dictate whether you're going to have close relationships or not. You can't just force yourself onto people.
Of course.
You know.
Of course.
So you're in that situation whenever that was, 10 months ago, 12 months ago.
So that's maybe 6 or 7 months ago. 7 months ago. And I remember I did an episode with Lamarck Thomas, who's a Swedish matchmaker. And he said that he's from St. Helena, the island of St. Helena, and he moved to Sweden to marry his husband. And when he moved to Sweden, he found himself suddenly without the web of connections that he was accustomed to. And he felt, you know, all the feels, and he felt resentful. And then he said, and Lila, I realized that they didn't need me. I didn't have that social structure yet, but they had grown up with these people, that they had longtime friends, and they didn't need me. So if I wanted to connect, I was going to have to make more of the effort. I have no problem making more of the effort to connect with people and to be friends and to set up things. I just honestly did not find the people that I wanted to connect with until I moved to Canggu.
Canggu.
Yeah, which in pre-COVID times was miserable, and I wrote back to friends at home and I said, it's like as if you put Miami in the meatpacking district. It's like the worst people with the worst attitudes, you know.
Well, I was living here.
No, of course it's a generalization, right? But I came here and I was struck by the aggressive driving, the honking, the loudness, the you know, city energy.
But that's
what I was trying to get away
people?
from.
That was
expats.
local people or expats here running around on their motorbikes?
Tourists and expats, right?
Yeah, sure.
Those folks. And a lot of them are gone now. So I think Canggu in pandemic times is like paradise.
Well, Bali generally is, right? As well? Oh, no.
I mean, sure, yes.
Yeah.
It is a kind of paradise.
It always has been, hasn't it? I think there's thousands, millions of people that would agree. So, talking about these relationships. I'm not going to say sexology, but sex. How did you get involved in this whole question of sex?
Question of sex.
Or discussion of sex.
Yeah, I've always been curious. I've always been incredibly curious. I was raised by... My mother was sex positive, but she wouldn't have known the term. The term has only come to be in use recently. But she taught me that sex is a good thing, sex is pleasurable, you can have sex, you know, when you get older, or sex is something you do with somebody that you love. And, you know, so she had a very positive view that she passed down to me. So luckily, I wasn't raised with that kind of indoctrination of shame around sex. So I think that just made fertile ground, essentially, for me to be able to speak about things that other people had trouble speaking about. So I would, and then I found that when I was traveling in Europe, when I was traveling up and down the U.S., on the East Coast, wherever I went, I was having conversations with people about their relationships. And people usually would reveal things to me. And I loved that because I love knowing things about people. And I had no problem revealing things about myself because I'd been trained as an actress. And, you know, I felt very comfortable with my emotions, very comfortable to share.
But you'd never studied psychology or is that...
Except for a few courses in acting school, no. I don't have a degree in psychology.
Okay.
My dad was a child psychologist.
Yeah,
My mother was
you
a
were
social
saying.
worker.
Yeah. So you're already brought up in that atmosphere, right?
Yeah, my mom gave me Games People Play and Reviving Ophelia to read when I was a teenager, you know, so these kinds of things are...
You've been brought up with.
Yeah, relational dynamics, or being brought up and to think about things in that way.
And your extended family, was it like that as well?
No.
No.
The Brazilian side of the family, I don't know that well, honestly, because I haven't spent more than several months at a time with them in my life. So I actually don't know how they're raising their kids and what they, you know, I have one cool cousin who I know knows what I do and is a supporter, but other than that, I really don't know.
Okay.
But this side of the family that's in the States, my dad's side of the family, they are mostly religious people, Christians and Catholics.
Okay.
I don't have really any connection with them. I'm pretty well poised, well placed in my life to be able to talk about these things with minimum friction because all my grandparents are dead, so I'm not worried about harming them. I wasn't raised with religion, so I don't have that shame. I don't care about my extended family's opinion. And my parents have always supported what I wanted to do eventually.
and I guess you're well, because now you're doing it well, I wouldn't say as work or a job, but you're doing it kind of full time. It's part of your life, right?
No, it is my career. So this podcast is part of that. I started doing intimacy coaching as part of that, and I'm working on a video course. So I'm going to have a digital course, a product about connection, about how to connect. That's coming out. So this,
and that's within relationships.
Actually,
or
there will be
all relationships.
There will be multiple units because one part of my intention is to expand people's notion of intimacy beyond the sexual and the romantic to encompass all of our close relationships. Because my sense is that when we relegate intimacy to the realm of the sexual and the romantic, we starve. Because we try to get it all from one place, from one person. We can't get it all there. And if we don't have that person, then we're even more bereft. So my hope is to expand people's idea of what intimacy is and can be, so that we can have more sources of nourishment, right? We can be fed from many different streams.
So how about sex then, per se? Everybody seems to be hung up on it.
Sure.
In one way or the other, no?
Right? Even if you're not interested in it.
I have my hang-ups or whatever they are, whatever you want to call them.
There's I just want to present a counterpoint that there's asexual people and there's an asexual spectrum on which are folks who do not have an interest in sex.
Yeah.
So not everyone, but most of us. I'm going to go with most of us.
Actually, sometimes I think I border on one of those, that it seems, I mentioned that earlier, that the pros and cons of a sexual life. There are definitely pros and cons. It's not all just plain sailing.
What have the cons
well,
been
I'd say
for you?
The cons would be getting. Oh, this is difficult, right?
Yeah.
Going in too deep, too far, and what then? Losing yourself,
so
say?
Emotionally, you mean?
Yeah, I guess I've always been hung up on freedom more than anything.
I understand. Yeah, that's my core value as well.
I find the more deeper you get involved with another person, that the more you're accountable to that person.
Right.
And a big part of that is the sexual connection, because you're having that connection with them. You're not having it with someone else. So you're completely, absorbed by this other person.
Well, there are a lot of alternative relationships as well. Have you ever explored open relationships?
That sounds even more complicated.
It is, but it's a lot more honest. And it can give you, what's so beautiful about them is that they have the potential to give you your freedom as well as your desire for closeness and coziness and connection and care.
Okay. But there are issues involved, with multiple partners, issues. Right?
Always, yeah.
Which is more complicated than having a single partner.
Depending on how you go about it. Because my sense is that a lot here... Okay. So, when you hear monogamy, most of us think, okay, there's only one way to do monogamy, and this is the way that it is. So we don't talk about it. So if we're in a monogamous relationship, we don't say to our partner, what does monogamy mean to you, Stuart?
One person.
One person for
relationship, for sex.
One person for sex.
For intimacy, for building a life.
How about for flirting?
Flirting should be okay.
How about for...
Without going too far.
Dancing?
No problem. I'm not a particularly jealous person, as long as...
Is it okay? Is it okay for you to masturbate when you're in a monogamous relationship?
It's normally... I'd find that in my past, that'd be a warning sign.
A warning sign?
Yeah, of something not quite happening within the relationship.
Really? I think that's quite healthy. But there's a lot of ideas around this kind of stuff. Is it okay for you to use porn if you are in a monogamous relationship?
I have done.
But do you think it's okay?
I think it's
Is that in monogamy for you?
That's okay.
That's part of monogamy.
No, it's not. No. That's I'm talking monogamy. Monogamy would be one person, physical person.
Physical person.
Not imaginary or
so
or
fantasies
photos.
are fine.
Absolutely, yeah.
Having sex with that one person, but fantasizing about somebody else all the time is okay.
Wow,
that's right. It's complicated,
That's
right?
another
it's
kettle
nuanced.
of fish.
And that's what I'm trying to say, is that monogamy is complicated too. And that we have these norms that we sort of think that everybody else has, and we don't check in about them. And that causes so much damage. So much damage because you discover, oh my God, my partner's been doing this thing that I feel is cheating. For instance, let's use the porn thing. There are many, many people who think their partner using porn is cheating.
Okay.
I do not, but there are many, many people who do.
I can
so
imagine
they
that.
discover it, that their partner's been using porn, and they are devastated, and they feel so betrayed. Now, that's because they didn't have a conversation about what monogamy meant to them. That's because they never had that conversation about porn.
Right. So, at that point, they have the conversation and it all becomes clear? Or the damage is done?
There is damage. There is damage that then has to be dealt with in some kind of way. And I've recently come across something that said the health of a relationship is determined by how it repairs.
Sure.
Because there's going to be rupture all the time. No matter what, there's going to be rupture. Monogamy, non-monogamy, dating, whatever. There's going to be rupture. So how are you going to go about repairing?
Absolutely. I've always thought, or not always, just recently over the last couple of relationships over the last few years, I always dreamt of getting through to that other side.
Yeah.
You know, when the relationships hit a wall and communication, everyone's breaking up, whatever.
Yeah.
And living in hope that it's going to get to this other side. You know? And I imagine, people that do have healthy relationships have exactly that situation and they get to the other side.
Yeah, but I think hope is not what does it.
Yeah, that's right. But a circumstance as well, no?
No, I think people who have the capability of repairing in this way, people that get through to the other side, as you called it, are people who have the tools to get through to the other side and who want to do it with each other.
Yeah.
So people ask me a lot, like, should I leave my partner? Like, or when do I know when it's over? And I give them the Ram Dass quote that we're all just walking each other home. And I say that I think the time when it's over is when you no longer want to be walking alongside that person home.
Yeah. They're walking to another home.
Right. And most of us don't have these tools, is the thing. We were not taught relational tools in elementary school. We were not taught, most of us, by our parents. We're watching these models. We're looking at almost a film library of our memories of crappy relationships and people treating each other poorly and people having treated us poorly and thinking, well, that's what love is. That's what I've seen love to be. And so we enact these patterns unconsciously. They coincide, they butt up against somebody else's unconscious patterns. And unless we say, whoa, we need some support here. We need some tools. Let's learn some things together. Let's have some sort of structure. Then you can't get through to the other side.
And that's with a counselor of some description.
It could be a counselor. It could be an intimacy coach like me. It could be a sex educator if the problems seem to be centered around sex. It could be a book. It could be Esther Perel's TED Talks. There are tools everywhere.
Yeah, sure.
And
we're all learning, right? We
Yeah.
I think everybody is on the same boat there. We're all learning at our own speed, at our own time, and there's reasons. There are reasons for how and why we end up the way we are. And for my case in particular, since I'm the one talking, and I have this hang up about losing my freedom, that, here I am in this single situation where I can do exactly what I want to do when I want to do it, and I don't have to.
Yeah.
I
Check
don't
in with
have.
anybody.
Yeah, I don't have to get permission.
Absolutely.
Somebody calls up and say, "Oh, let's meet for dinner." I go. Or whatever. It could be male, could be female, could be anything.
This may
that's
be the
pleasurable.
relational life for you.
Yeah.
There is, and that's another thing, right? This box of what we are supposed to want as humans. We're supposed to want to pair bond. We're supposed to want this dyad of one other person, and then commitment, and then longevity. And then what's terrible is that we have one metric by which a relationship is successful. One metric,
What's
and
that?
that is time.
If
How
you
can
last to
that
the...
yes. Okay. Haven't you known a ton of shitty relationships that have gone on for years and years and years and years?
Sure.
How could that possibly be the
But
metric?
they're very
the
proud.
only one
But
for
they're
a
very
good
proud they
relationship?
made it. Right?
Yeah, but I wouldn't choose that. I can make a different choice. I'm a third generation feminist. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, but okay, I agree with what you're saying there too. But there's also another side of it which says that, we could say that no matter who you're with, there's always going to be some kind of dramas, and we have to.
I agree.
You have to figure out how to live together.
Sure.
No matter how much you're in love with them, or how
Yes.
great they are, you're together in bed, or communicating, or anything else.
But I think there's a difference between that and abject misery, which is a lot of couples' relationships,
Yeah.
and they just endure. And then maybe, when their relationship is at death's door, when it is so sick, it's got terminal cancer,
All right.
that's when they finally go to a professional. And the professional does their best, but they're like, you brought me a dying patient.
Right.
Your relationship
It's done.
was,
Done 20
like,
years ago, 30 years ago.
it's dust now,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So what about this, what is it? What did you say before? Not a monogamous, but polygamous relationship.
Non-monogamous.
So
Non-monogamy.
No, go back again.
back?
Into my case, where I'm
Okay.
I've found my freedom.
Yes.
But you
And you're
still,
happy.
but you still need sex.
Sure.
Right. So,
Yeah.
where are you supposed to find that?
So, ideally, you are upfront with people that you meet, and you say something like, "I am so attracted to you.
That's
I would
the point,
love
right?
to spend time with you. I'd love to have sex with you. I'm not available for a monogamous relationship. I love
or a
being,
full-time relationship.
or a full-time relationship. I love being free, and I wonder if you would be interested in having some dates with me sometimes, knowing that it wouldn't be an exclusive thing. Would you be interested in that?
Okay.
Giving the person the information that they really need to make a clear decision. Because what people don't do is that. right? They just go out with the person. They do their best to have sex with the person. They don't tell the person there is another safe sex conversation. And we'll call it safer sex because sex is not safe. So we have a safer sex conversation. There's the one that you know about. I hope at least by now most people know about. I was last tested for these things. These are the test results. I'm having sex with these people. I use protection or don't. And then whatever you want to tell them about what you like, so there's a great safer sex conversation right there. Read Mahalko from readaboutsex.com. That's part of his safer sex elevator speech. So if you're unsure about how to talk to people about that, check out his safer sex elevator speech, REID aboutsex.com. So there's another safer sex conversation. And the other safer sex conversation that if you Google that, the video should come up because I don't remember the person's name who created it. But the other safer sex conversation is, what's it going to mean to you if we have sex? Because hopefully you get to intention there. And hopefully people are able to be honest enough. And sometimes they're not. And sometimes they don't even know themselves. So we're people. But hopefully you're able to say, actually, I'm looking for, a long-term relationship. Or, hey, I'm really just looking for some part-time companionship and some fun and some play. That's what I really want. But being upfront.
Okay. Or you're looking for a prostitute as
Well,
well.
having a sex worker, if your core value is freedom, and you actually don't want any emotional involvement, you don't want it to be emotionally messy, a sex worker is actually a great option because that is their job. And it's their job to please you, and it's their job to entertain you and to give you a good time and not to fall in love with you and not to demand your emotional attention. And so I wish there were no stigma around sex work. There's a reason why it's been around. There's a reason why it's called the oldest profession.
Yeah, sure.
And there's a reason why it still exists.
And there's a reason why
because
it's all over town
needed.
where we are right now.
I actually didn't know that. I guess I don't have the eyes out for.
Well, there is, yeah. There are. Well, with the COVID, everything's kind of a little bit different, I guess. But no, there is a lot of workers around the place, for sure.
Well, it's also one of the
in
historically
the nightlife, probably. You know, there's
Oh, that
also
makes
there's
sense.
also other, there's definitely places you could go to as well.
Well, historically, it's also one of the only ways that underprivileged and disenfranchised peoples could make money.
Yes. Well, absolutely, and it still goes on today, and
And it
all
still goes
over the
on.
world. Doesn't You don't have to be in a third world country to do it,
No,
and
of
there are
course not.
some people that actually enjoy doing it as a job. So,
Absolutely.
and they make good money out of it.
Yeah. And
Bless
they
them.
enjoy making people happy in that way.
Yeah.
You know, and I have not been interested in it for myself because I'm very, very particular with who touches my body, and I'm not generous with my touch with anybody I don't want to be
Sure.
touching me. So there isn't a way that I could do that would feel good to me. But I have friends who are sex workers who enjoy it.
Yeah.
And enjoy giving people that pleasure. And there's a lot that they have in common with genuine healers, actual people who are providing healing experiences.
For sure.
There also is a profession of sex surrogacy. So it is a sex worker, but a sex worker whose job is to, sometimes for disabled people, whose job is to provide also a caring experience
Absolutely.
for the client.
Well, yeah. I wouldn't want to talk too much about my personal life, but especially now.
Right.
But
Woo,
you know,
keep it under wraps.
there's. I remember a girl saying to me, an Indonesian girl, many years ago, and her mother brought her up, saying that there was like 10 things she should do for her man. And not only was it like the cleaning up and the cooking and everything else, but also being a husband's whore.
Right.
And I think in the Western modern society, that's sometimes forgotten of the roles that people, man and woman could play.
Really?
Yeah. For to create a harmony within a relationship.
I mean, I would like it if we were both each other's whores. That's more interesting to me. But
yeah, but it's not. Yeah, okay, we go.
I mean,
down that
I've definitely heard the the gender stereotype of the mom being like, keep his stomach full and his balls empty, and I think
Yeah.
that was also an Asian mother who said that.
Yeah, I think it is. And if you're looking around Asia, that's more or less what's happening. It's still happening now.
One of my close friends said that I think she got it from a reality TV show where somebody said, be your husband's girlfriend or he'll get one.
Yeah.
But this is all coming from a monogamous, heteronormative viewpoint, right? And
Misogynist, did you say?
I didn't,
could
but
be.
it's in there.
It could be.
It's in there.
It could be. And the women that I know, that I've known that actually practice this way of life, they seem to be quite happy with it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah.
You tell me.
Sovereignty feels wonderful. Expressing what you actually, first of all, figuring out what you actually want is very satisfying. Most people don't really know because it's very difficult to separate the Disney in your brain, the religion in your brain, the parents in your brain, the society in your brain from what you really, really desire. For instance, a very small thing, I love to have sex. I love to cuddle, but I don't love sleeping next to somebody because I don't sleep well. And so for a long time, I would just sleep next to my partners and just not sleep well and then, deal with it and try to make up for it when they weren't available. But if I'm really honest, when I got down to what I actually want is for us to have sex, for us to cuddle, for us to kiss goodnight, and for them to leave.
Yeah.
So that I can sleep alone.
For sure.
And this is a very touchy, sort of unusual thing to ask for because the norm is that you have sex, you stay the night. And I would love to have breakfast with them in the morning. I just don't want to sleep next to them.
Yeah. Well, you can have another bedroom. You could have another bed somewhere and
that would be great. Yeah.
Sneak off.
And I would like that. I would like to, I think I also would like to have separate dwellings that are very close to one another, even if I'm in a more involved relationship with someone.
Absolutely.
I want to have an unconventional relationship, a relationship by design. And I think more people, if they knew about this concept, if they recognized, oh wow, I don't actually have to do it the way I see my parents have done it, or the way I've seen it in movies, if they actually read a book like Relationship by Design or Relationship Agreements by a woman who lives here, Ari Cardos. Shout out to Ari Cardos. Hey Ari. If they read things like this to expand their notion of what is possible in a relationship, I think we'd all be a lot happier.
Sure.
So figuring out your desires and then expressing them to somebody else, and then giving that other person the sovereignty, the opportunity to say, yes, I would like that. I would like to walk alongside you for that. Or no, I'm not interested. That's not what I want.
Well, the trouble is, too, when you meet someone that you're well, for me, if I met someone that I'm that interested in having sex with, I want to be with them.
Well, what does being with them mean to you?
Like consuming them.
Tell me more. What is this consuming?
Well, having them around all the time.
All the time.
Well, I like the way you were describing before of having two different houses.
I love that idea.
And then you meet up sometimes.
Yeah.
You know,
and that doesn't mean you can't spend the night, right? That means sometimes you can go over to their house, or they can come over to your house, right. Or maybe you spend a week there. Who knows? But that you have a room of one's own, and you can always go back to it. You have your own space. To me, that feels like a kind of freedom.
Sure, that's the kind of freedom we're looking for.
The thought of living with somebody terrifies me. Actually,
have you?
Not with a lover. No, not with a partner.
Oh no.
I think cohabitation is the number one thing that is socially accepted as the way to go when you're escalating a relationship that kills relationships.
I'd have to agree with you.
I mean, it's so hard to live with people.
But it makes sense in so many ways too.
Well, I think it's mainly a financial decision much of the time.
Well, yeah. Because the majority of young people don't even have one house, let alone two.
Of course.
So, you know.
But I have seen people live in, say, a communal house or live in an apartment and have separate bedrooms. I think that even that little bit of separation, this is my space, that is your space, we can visit, but I own this space, is powerful. Unconventional and powerful. And it's, a lot of times these things seem quite simple when you say them. Like, oh, of course you don't have to live together. But yet it is actually a wildly radical idea for most of the population.
To live together.
To not
live together, sorry.
To be in a deep relationship where you don't cohabitate. But why should that be?
Because I don't know, you're supposed to have children, you're supposed, I don't know, build a...
Are you? And that's the thing.
A family? Is it...
If everybody wanted a family, then we could say that. But everybody does not want a family. No. I don't want a family. Okay. I do understand wanting to cohabitate to raise children under one roof. I definitely understand that. Yeah. And it will have a great, as many married people have found, it will have a great strain on your relationship. That doesn't mean it can't be navigated. As you said, all relationships undergo strain. All of them, not just our romantic and sexual ones, our friendships too, our familial relationships too, our mentor relationships, business partnerships, they all undergo strain.
So how about in Bali? Okay, so the first 6 months were pretty tough.
Yeah.
You couldn't connect with people.
Yeah.
And then since then, how's it panned out?
So when I moved to Canggu, my closest friend here, who lives in Sanur, so I didn't get to see her a lot, Kai Mata, who's a musician. She is basically the only out LGBTQ plus, maybe even person in Indonesia right now who is Indonesian. And it's
kind of dangerous to be outspoken, isn't it?
Very dangerous. And she writes these beautiful queer anthems, and she's a badass. I love you, Kai Mata. You are so incredible. What you're doing is amazing. Yeah, the boldness, and she's young. And
she's here in Bali.
She's here. Yeah, and she lives in Sanur. And she came when I first moved to Canggu to hang out with me. Took me to Crate Cafe so that we could go someplace that had communal tables where I would be more likely to meet people. And when we went, sure enough, we met a guy who happened to be hosting a once-a-week board game night. And then that became my source of joy, you know, like my most reliable source of joy for the next couple of months. I went every week, and I had a place where I knew we would just have lighthearted fun, and we would laugh, and we would have a good time. And then things populated from there, where somebody I met from there brought me to a Toastmasters meeting, and I did a speech. And then from there, somebody invited me to beach volleyball, and I went to beach volleyball, and then I went to dinner, and they said, oh, you know, you should meet this community organizer. And I met the community organizer, and the community organizer brought me to a shibari, a rope bondage meetup, or jam as it's called. I had been, you know, I'm surprised I didn't seek out the kinky or sex positive community earlier, because that's where I came from. I was living with those people. I was in a house where parties were taking place, you know, and that is a community I feel extremely comfortable with. But I didn't think to seek them out. So finally, this community organizer brought me to the space where they all congregate. And then I met a woman who's now my closest friend here. And from there, like, I had my sense of belonging. So now I have a best friend. Now I have a lover, possibly two. We'll see how it goes. Now I'm learning this beautiful skill, and I have that community. I have people to celebrate with. I just had my 1-year Bali anniversary, as I like to call it. And so tomorrow night we're going to go out, and I ordered a cake, and we're going to celebrate. I have people to do that with now.
Yeah. So now it's beginning to feel like...
And collaborators.
Home.
So now it begins to feel like home. And in May, I decided, okay, I'm out. I'm moving out of the community where I've been living in New York. That's no longer my home. That time has passed, and that chapter is over. But it took me until November to get my stuff moved out of that place. I was subletting, and it took me a while to let go, because it felt so strange to relinquish such an important part of my life while not being there. I didn't pack my boxes. I wrote a poem about it. Like, I did not pack my boxes with my hands. That felt so odd. It felt like a death, but a death in which the thing just evaporated. Yeah. And you didn't see it die, and you didn't, you know, you weren't there for the funeral. So that's how it felt in November.
Well, it's your own funeral, really.
Of the me that was part of that community.
Sure.
Yeah, that me is gone. But
well,
I have
else has packed
so
it up
much
and finished your life there for you.
Exactly. I have so much to thank that community for. That is where this podcast grew from. The conversations that we had about sex, love, and relationships, the conversations that we had, you know, in the kitchen at 2 a.m. and in the hot tub and in the backyard, and that we had regularly all of the time, that were vulnerable, revealing, raw, real, and also educational, not because we were trying to teach each other, but because if you've ever been in a 12-step meeting, you know that when you share your personal experience without trying to teach people, people tend to learn. They're learning by juxtaposing their story with yours in their head, right. You know, and that's what happens when we have these deep conversations. And I know that most people don't have access to the kind of conversation that we're having right now, this really revealing, open-minded conversation. And I have them all the time. I have this great good fortune. I wanted to give people access. So the way I think of the podcast is like consensual eavesdropping. We give you permission to listen in on a conversation that would usually be deemed private. Sure. We invite you. And
you're still doing that now.
I am.
But
I just recorded the other day.
Yeah.
2 days ago.
On the podcast. But outside of the podcast as well?
What do you mean?
Are you like connecting with people like on the same level when you're going out?
Now I am. Not necessarily when I'm going out, but the people that I choose to spend my time with, we are having these conversations. Right. Absolutely.
And you continue to learn from them.
Oh, yeah.
Or you feel like you're the teacher or something.
I mean, there's so much to learn. There's so much to learn. And something about learning that is so beautiful and also so frustrating is that when you have a revelation, it cannot be integrated unless it falls on fertile soil, right? So unless you're ready to have the realization and to make shifts because of it, it doesn't take root. So somebody can say something you've heard from 20 other people, but the way they say it and the time that they said it and the time inside you, the internal experience of being you at the moment when they say it to you can change your life. Whereas you could have heard that same thing so many times before. You just weren't ready for it. You weren't ready to change for it.
And you find that being in Bali makes you more ready for something, or is it the same as being in New York?
It's definitely not the same as being in New York. I think simply the act of slowing down and having a different pace. This is obviously a very different pace, even in Canggu, than New York City. And New York City is rightly understood as a place where you have to hustle in order to get by. You do, most of us, unless you're born rich or you've made a ton of money and you come there to spend your money. We have to hustle. That takes up so much life force that it is very difficult for a lot of people to...
Hello.
Hello there, we're on the radio.
Cut.
We can just pick up right where we left off.
You know where you are? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go.
That pace of life makes it very difficult for, I would say, many to most people to do the introspection required in order to change. And that's why I think most people only change when there is a rupture, right? Somebody dies, you have an accident, you have an illness, somebody breaks up with you, somebody divorces you.
Yeah.
You know, these things, we understand that people are going to change after those things. It's so much less likely that somebody just decides, oh, I want to change this thing, and they go on about it, right?
Well, which is basically what the whole world went through in the last year as well, right? Everything changed.
Oh, yeah.
So
beyond our control.
I think we're all in this collective, bathtub. And maelstrom.
That's very interesting. It's, I mean, it's painful in all kinds of ways, right? But it's very interesting because I don't think there's ever been a time in history before where we were all having a collective experience and aware of it because we could communicate with one another across the world to tell each other that we were experiencing similar things or the same things.
Yeah. It was just complete obsession with the one subject. And
where you are, it was so localized.
Yeah, but it was the same problem now having on the other side of the world, which, as you say, has never really happened before. Besides world wars, but that's not really on the same scale either.
No, and it also didn't involve the whole world.
No, that's right. It's only bits and pieces.
Yeah.
So theoretically, the whole world or the humanity has a chance of resetting and learning something about themselves during this period.
God, I hope so. I truly hope so. I mean, I wish my true desire for this time is that we would every nation go back to the indigenous people of that land, beg their forgiveness, make amends, make reparations, and humbly ask them to teach us how to take care of our earth because we have ruined it.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about Europeans.
I am saying we, in terms of white people and Europeans and colonizers. Yeah,
which is
which
is a very complicated subject as well.
I know.
Yeah, aren't we all? Because here we are, being foreigners in a foreign land.
Yeah,
as well.
Lucky enough to be allowed to stay in this foreign land, and privileged enough to be able to hire people to do things for us.
Well, yeah, and providing work or something for them. So the horizontal with Lila.
Yes.
What is that? Marie Claire. I saw this on your
on
your site. Marie Claire's quite a big publication.
Yes.
That's
and do you know,
huge.
nobody told me.
Then, what did it say? Sexy, poetic, eye-opening.
Yeah. Yeah, it was delicious to find this out. I didn't know, nobody told me that I was included in this roundup. And I was creating a discovery strategy for the podcast. So distinguished from an announcement strategy where you say, I made an episode, and the people who already know about you are informed that you made an episode. A discovery strategy is anything you might do to bring in new listeners. So I was developing my discovery strategy, which centers entirely around guesting on other people's shows. And so I was researching about other people's shows and Googling best love podcasts, best sex podcasts. And I, pulled up the Marie Claire one. And I was reading through it, and maybe, 5 or 6 in, I was like, that's mine! and there's nobody's around. I'm in Ubud. I'm in lockdown. I'm like, oh my God!
Did you see this?
And I jumped up and down, and I pumped my fists over my head. I'm like, oh my.
Was that Marie Claire USA or Marie Claire France or Marie Claire
US, yeah.
Indonesia?
US for sure.
I was quite amazed actually the other day. I went looking for sexuality podcasts on Apple, and man, the amount of stuff on there.
Oh yeah.
It's incredible. Everyone's talking about sex.
There's a lot. I can recommend some good ones.
All right, well, we can get to that. But that little ring going off meant that I've got to change something in the oven. So, which also means that we're about done, or we can't fit this onto Instagram, IGTV, which will go on tomorrow.
Lovely.
Because it has to be less than an hour. It's been great to have you on the show, and I look forward to having you on again at some point.
Be delightful.
Anyway, Lila from Horizontal with Lila. We'll see you again soon.
Bye.
And we'll see everybody else soon too. We'll send you back to the music. We're going to listen to, let's check it out. Let's go back to Flater back here. You're on the Beat Radio Bali. We're going live across the whole planet. Let's see if it's going to work. Our top 5 listeners happen to be in Germany. Woo. So, yeah, there we are. We'll see you next week.